Spend more than 30 seconds thinking about your pricing. It's the most existential decision that you'll make. It's the most impactful decision that you'll make, and it deserves more of your attention.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for in eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the tested relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today our guest is Ammanuel Selameab. Here are three things you want to know about Ammanuel before we start. He is an avid listener to this podcast. Woohoo! He is the head of pricing at Carta, and he recently started his own company called Run Pricing Tests. Welcome, Ammanuel.
Thanks. Super excited to be here and have a conversation about pricing.
So am I. First off, thanks for listening. I appreciate the fact that you told me that. That was months ago that you told me that, but
yeah, this is a really fantastic platform and podcast. I reflected to you, it's could have easily been a podcast of pricing people patting each other on the back, but you have a wide selection of guests and interesting perspectives, and it makes the conversations fun to listen to. So congratulations on an amazing project you put together.
Oh, thank you. But as you're about to learn, I do this because I like learning from people, and I'm asking questions that I just don't know the answers to. So here we go.
That's awesome.
So let's start with, how did you get into pricing?
I studied economics as an undergrad and landed a job in supply chain early in my career, and kind of stumbled into pricing as just the next thing to do. It seemed at the time to be this perfect harmony between what I had studied in school, some of the tools and techniques it was really one of the only fields that felt like a direct application of what I had studied, other than going into academia to pursue a PhD or something in economics, and fell in love with it. And 7 years later, it's all I've been doing. And it's a really fascinating world. It's a world that not enough people talk about and not enough people are interested in. And so, incidentally, to pat yourself, to give you a pat on the back, the work you're doing in evangelizing the importance of pricing, shouting it from the rooftops, is important. And I think what my career to date has been largely comprised of.
Oh, thank you. And I know you don't know the future, but do you think you're going to stay in pricing your career, or do you think this is a stepping stone to something else?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I launched a business, and that's really where I think my long-term aspirations lie. But as far as career trajectory within pricing, I found that it's actually, once you hit probably a director or VP of pricing, I've seen some chief pricing officers, I mean, maybe two, but you don't really see pricing people in the C-suite. So it strikes me that, yes, pricing is an awesome career path and can get you very far. It's a specialized skill, it's a niche skill, but in terms of career pathing, you're kind of tapped out once you hit a director or VP level. And so branching off into consulting, building your own company, or pivoting into some more general CRO role or go-to-market role is likely where folks have to go. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, career path.
Yes. So the thing I love about I don't know if you heard this podcast, but we had on a VP of innovations from Stanley Black & Decker a few months ago. And I brought him on because he had been in the pricing field, and I was really curious about his career transition and how he did all that. And what he said, which is what I believe completely, is that when you're in the pricing role, you learn to think about how customers make decisions, what value means to them, and it gives you a different perspective than almost any other role inside the company. And it's such a valuable role that even if you leave pricing, pricing will never leave you, right? It's always going to be this attitude of customers and how do they make decisions and how do they perceive value. And I think that's what makes people promotable in the long run.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'd also add that because pricing initiatives almost always are cross-functional in nature, you're exposing yourself to many different functional areas. You're learning about different functional areas. And so in terms of your capacity to lead, you now have a much broader perspective on the business than someone perhaps exclusively in accounting or sales might not be privy to. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, good. Well, the reason I had you on is I wanted to talk about price testing. First, tell me about the company that you started. What's it look like? How are you finding customers? What's the product you're offering?
Yeah, it started a couple of months ago. I had some people reach out to me and ask if I did consulting, and at the time I didn't, but was like, yeah, sure,
Of course.
consulting. Of course, I like money. And that led to a series of engagements and what to me unearthed a larger problem with how, so if we're all on the same page as to we ought to be a value-based pricer, we ought to price to value, how do you actually measure value? How do you actually do those things? And as I've seen so far in my career, the primary techniques or tools for answering that question consist largely of asking people in your target market, whether we can wrap it in conjoint analysis or Van Westendorp or max diff or price interviews, but effectively you're just asking people in your market what your stuff is worth to them. The projects and engagements that I've been working on that I felt to be to collect the most reliable data, on the other hand, were observational data. So presenting people with offers and seeing how they actually respond to them. What people say they'll do and what people actually do can be two very different things. And so all to say, the business that I built is around taking pricing hypotheses and going to market and testing their viability. And I can go into more detail there, but effectively it's collecting what to me is the most reliable way of ascertaining whether a price recommendation makes sense, which is asking or presenting people with real offers and seeing how they react to it.
I think without a doubt, people actually behave differently than they say they will behave, which is an important aspect of what we're talking about here. How there are many issues I see with what you're doing, and we'll get to some of those by far, but I want to hear the positive side first. What kind of results do you find for people? How do you set up the tests? I'd love to know a little bit more.
Yeah, it's we try to structure them in terms of an A/B or split test framework. So we have a test cohort, control cohort, and it's not perfect, of course, but the only variable that we want to explain the differences in how these two cohorts perform over the duration of the test is the thing that we're testing. So the groups are segmented by willingness to pay. So they're a similar group of customers. They have a similar set of needs. Then we split them off into two groups and we make one group an offer that the other group gets the status quo, whatever the current rate card or packaging structure is. The reason for that obviously is it's hard to assess or ascertain causality if you don't structure a test in that sort of way. So price optimization tools, as an example, are great. Like they're looking backwards and pulling data and building models, but it's really hard to, I think those are problematic for a number of other reasons as well, but it's hard to ascertain causality from those backward looking models. So there's that. And then the actual, we're connecting to a CRM or an ERP to actually manage the data and report on performance. That was a very long answer, but that's effectively okay. It's kind of the structure of it.
So this is mostly e-commerce sales, is that correct?
No, more B2B with sales and prices being presented via reps.
Oh, direct salespeople going out and presenting prices. Okay,
yep.
That's really, so I love that more than e-commerce, in the sense that with e-commerce, I'm a little worried of two different people getting different prices and that becoming public because someone wants to make fun of a company or, find something unethical that they're doing. But if it's B2B salespeople making presentations, we do that all day long, right? Salespeople negotiate prices every time they walk into a customer store. So there's nothing against, hey, we made this offer here, we didn't make that offer there.
Exactly. Yeah. Price. I think I can anticipate the cons, which are real. The risk present in price discrimination. In this framework, it's to your point, it already is happening. Reps are managing discounts as they're working with different customers. So in effect, it's the same things happen. It's just that in this, for the one to 2 month period that we're running a test, it's just a more structured way of doing what's already happening.
Yeah, in the B2B world, with direct salespeople, I have no qualms about price segmentation or price discrimination issues. I don't think that's an issue at all. Sometimes when you teach companies that are in the B2B space, they think that's a problem, but it's almost never a problem because you see it so often.
Yeah, and that's been something I'm finding I have to educate. When you hear price testing, or particularly A/B price testing, you immediately think e-commerce and segmenting traffic into 2 buckets. But that's not really what we do. And the other, I think, to anticipate another objection you might raise, which is it's not just about the price level. There's a universe of attributes related to how you're selling: your price metric, your packages, your bundling, contract length, the more psychological metrics of how you're positioning prices. I mean, it's not just how much you're charging. But all of that merits testing and getting real-time feedback from people.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Now, as soon as you change more than one of those, it's hard to say what was the issue. Was it the price level, or was it the way I framed it when I presented it, or right? So it gets challenging. I think the challenge I would have in what you described to me, meaning B2B direct salespeople, is there's probably not as much data as I would get in an e-commerce site where I'm going B2C and I've got thousands of people that are seeing one offer versus another offer.
Yeah, certainly true. We screen for transaction size and transaction volume per month, and we strive to hit statistical significance, and we can measure at what point are we hitting it. But in situations where there's data scarcity, there's in effect, or not enough transactions, we have to rely more on qualitative measures and measurement. The reality is that companies aren't using any data to make pricing decisions. So even if we don't achieve stat sig, any amount of data we can provide you to inform your pricing decisions is a good thing, in my opinion.
So let's pretend that you have a p-value of 70%, right? All of a sudden you say, well, at least I'm 70% sure that I'm right. I may not be 95 or 99% significance, but this is a decent guess.
Yeah. That opens up a can of worms of just statistics education, I suppose, and interpreting statistical results, which is maybe a conversation for another day. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, decisions are probabilistic, and the more data you can bring to the table to inform a decision, the higher the odds of success you'll have. But it's still what I find to be a bit challenging is building a deck for 3 months to produce a pricing recommendation, and then the grand unveil, and then good luck, which is how I see a lot of consultants operate with businesses. So for what it's worth, I think going to market, doing the work for companies of testing and vetting out ideas is the best way of supporting them. Again, super biased and coming. Yep. Just my perspective on it, but
yeah, I think that's pretty fascinating. So let me tell you another big problem I have with data-driven decisions, which most people are the opposite, right? Give me data, I want to make data-driven decisions. In the world of pricing, when we make decisions based on data, especially purchase data, then we tend to lose or stop thinking about value. So we stop thinking about why is it that this customer values this product, or why does this customer value it differently than that customer? And so I'm not saying that you're causing that at all. And in fact, in the way you described your tests, I'd say that you have the ability to try to get the best out of both of those worlds. Or let's do a little bit of data and let's try to ask the questions why, because you've got direct salespeople in there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think particularly, what I've seen in past roles where we've implemented testing is we test one thing and then suddenly we want to test everything without really any rhyme or reason. I view what we do as a social science, and I think pricing has been more heavy on the social and less on the science. And so there's some harmony of both, obviously, of utilizing the best data science and AI tools that we have, but under the lens of we're studying human beings making decisions, not just throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks.
Yep.
Kind of mentality.
Yep. Nice. So tell me about, how do you roll out a price test with a company that has a direct sales force? Doesn't every salesperson want the best price?
You'd be surprised. And it's also contingent first on what the company wants to do, the overall business objectives. We're aligning our pricing strategy to what the company overall wants to do, not the motivations of individual sales reps. So in general, the process is, you sit with typically a CRO who, that, as we both know, pricing responsibility can sit in different places at a company, but if there is a CRO, that person usually both is responsible for pricing and has revenue targets. So they're very motivated to get pricing right. We just think about like the first thing an engagement typically looks like is, what is your most pressing worry about your pricing? What's the thing that's keeping you up at night right now? Let's go test that first. And let's just start with the proof of concept to see. We'll do the legwork of structuring the test, advising, monitoring it on an ongoing basis, reporting results. But I think that first win for a company and just seeing what pricing can do for them is really impactful. And we've seen some, over the course of my career in doing tests, seen some really incredible lifts that make sense, lifts in ACV of when introducing a package or raising a price or reducing discounting. As we both know, but getting to that first win and that first bit of validation for a company, to me, is the most important.
Yeah. So I guess what I was really curious about is, how do you just leave it up to the company to say, hey, we're going to roll this out. Half the salespeople are going to sell this way. Half the salespeople are going to sell that way.
Oh, you mean more? Okay. Let me give a more tactical answer for sure. Yeah. So once we align on what the test goal is, so supposing it's, we are trying to establish the correct price level for this given package. We will typically then, within the CRM, segment the customers that we are going to expose in sort of a test and control. Then we train the reps. One set of reps will get one set of prices and the other will get another. Under the CRO is directing reps to do one or the other. And I think in the long term, we'll probably build in blockers within the CRM that force reps to present a certain price or not. But it's all directed from the CRO in terms of getting the sales teams on the same page and getting them to deliver and execute different prices.
Yeah, I've worked in enough companies or seen enough companies, I could just see that not going smoothly.
Yeah, I think there are other issues that raises of quota and how come that other person gets a different price than we do. And so because these aren't permanent changes, they're, a month or 2 months. So far, it hasn't been problematic. The CRO just makes the adjustments and sets expectations on their end. But yeah, you're right. It could grow to be a bigger problem down the road, and something we'll have to get ahead of and address.
Yeah. What size companies typically, I guess the word is, what size companies would typically hire you to do this? Where do you think it fits well?
It's a great question. I mean, we're still early going, so we're still trying to answer that question ourselves. But so far what's been working is Series A, Series B companies, usually actually under 20 million, under 50 million. They're at an early stage in the company. They're very interested in growing, and they're the most anxious about whether their pricing is correct or not. Too small, and they both don't have the number of transactions we need, and they can't pay us. I think the event for a lot of these startups is we're about to go fundraise. We need the highest valuation we can. So we want to have someone come in and run pricing tests. That's been kind of a sweet spot so far, but
nice.
It can certainly change.
And in that 20 to 50 million range, that feels like there's probably in the ballpark of 10 salespeople you're dealing with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like 10 to 20 usually.
Mm-hmm.
So So it's a manageable workforce, sales force. And in the future, like I alluded to earlier, I think we'll find more automated ways of managing sales teams. I mean, supposing we have a company with 100 sales reps, we have to build tools to manage price recommendations and changes out to them. But so far it's been working well. Not without its take-ups and challenges, but it's been so far so good.
Yep. Good. Okay. So just to prove that this is valuable to people, here's what I'd like to ask. What's the biggest test success dollar-wise? Don't give me a company or product or anything, right? But what's the biggest test success dollar-wise that you found that said, hey, when we change this to this, we could create X amount more money, X amount more revenue?
Just wrapped up a test earlier this year where we changed, I'm trying to be as anonymous as possible, but basically we ran a test, changed a package, and drove a 300% lift in ACV. Nice.
Okay, so here's the next question. Have you found any tests where there was no impact?
For sure, or negative impact.
Negative impact, even better.
Right? Yeah, that's not every test is successful for sure. A few years ago, ran a test at a previous company, and within 2 weeks, the test cohort, it was negative 50% ARR. I mean, it was absolutely tanking. So yeah, that does happen. I mean, then you terminate the test and you move on to something else. But then you're also gaining valuable information that then informs the next test you want to run.
Oh, so trust me, I'm not being negative about that at all. Because here's what you just said. You just said, had we just made the decision to do the change, we would have lost a ton of money. But instead, we tested it. Does this make sense? Oh, no, it doesn't make sense. Let's not do that.
It's as simple as that. Yeah, exactly. It's and this is the reason why before making a wholesale change to your pricing and packaging, testing whether you use us or someone else is, to me, the plausible way of approaching it. Even with the best analysis, you've done a survey and your Van Westendorp curves are, you know, you have like it's great. You have a robust recommendation. You still probably want to test it in the market before making a change to your pricing page and running with it wholesale.
So I think that's a great place to end this in the following sense. No matter how much I like the idea that we're going to go out and understand value and we're going to ask people how much they're willing to pay in different ways, and we're going to do all this analytics, after we've made these decisions, say, I think our best decision is to go do this, why wouldn't we go test it? Because if you don't go test it, it's just like I'm taking this risk that everything I did was right.
Exactly, yeah. If you're confident in your decision, your test should prove out to be successful. If you're not willing to test, it probably tells you something about your level of confidence with whatever recommendation that you're hoping to make.
Or my level of impatience, one or the other.
Fair, yeah, totally.
All right. So Emmanuel, before we wrap this up, final question. What's the one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Spend more than 30 seconds thinking about your pricing. It's the most existential decision that you'll make. It's the most impactful decision that you'll make, and it deserves more of your attention.
Nice. I agree 100%, by the way.
I thought you might.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Emmanuel@runpricingtest.com and shoot me a note.
All right. Episode 76, all done. Nice. Okay. Every single week, I plead with you listeners to please give me a review for the podcast. And my marketing folks just beg me to beg you. And so here's what we're doing now. We're going to give away access to our value-based business course if you will leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this. All you have to do is leave the review, take a screenshot, email me the screenshot, and we will give you access to the value-based business course. We sell this thing for $500 and it's worth way more than that. So I highly recommend you do it. And hopefully my marketing people will stop complaining to me. So let's see if we can make that happen, please. Don't forget, we have the community at championsofvalue.com. That's where you see all of my content that gets posted there, my memes, my blogs, my videos, my podcasts. So go there if you want to see, make sure you're not missing anything. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.